too? All right,
I don't know where it is.
announcements. The Wikipedia-thon, I think we're going to Wikipedia edit-a-thon. I'm thinking about changing it to the last week of class. It's originally scheduled for the 21st, I think? 20th? Okay. So it'll be that following Wednesday, yes? So the very last week of class, during class. Does that present a problem for anybody?
Not that I know of yet.
So the 27th?
So the 27th, and then the 20th, we will share our exhibition projects with each other.
Oh, boy. The 20th?
20th? Yeah.
Yeah, well, they're due, I think they're due.
They're due on the
20th.
20th.
Yeah.
Have you talked to Simpson? I keep
I
forgetting.
forgot.
So is that a problem for anybody? Is that a problem for you, Nicole,
I don't
and
think
Laura,
so.
if you move the Wikipedia edit-a-thon to the 27th
I
instead of
forgot,
the
and I
20th?
kept seeing her on Tuesday.
Every time I mean to like ask you and then ask her.
Was that a yes? I couldn't hear.
Yes.
Yeah, that's fine.
Okay, good. I will change that then. I've kind of revised the last part of the syllabus, so I'll make that change, then I'll upload the revised syllabus to Google Classroom. Okay, so 27th it is. So that means we can't have any late exhibition projects, or else she'll be kind of standing there saying nothing, right? So that week, the leading up to the class of the 20th, on the 20th, there won't be any assignments because you'll be focusing on, hopefully you're working on your exhibition projects, right? It's not a last minute thing, but that'll give you a little time at the end to kind of tweak everything and get it ready. So you don't need to, that week you won't need to watch them online or anything, because we're going to go through, all of them will be submitted to me via Google Classroom, but then I'll actually have to present them to the class, as I say, on the 20th. So I have to figure it out, probably like 10 minutes each, something like that. So you can just share with us, the goals, the objectives of your exhibition, and maybe not all the pieces, but highlights from the exhibition. And then we'll allow a few minutes for a little discussion, okay? So that's the way I envision this working. Is everybody okay with that? Yeah?
If you send the invite to my email now as well, I think I've got the computer fixed.
Oh, wait, say that again, Lauren, it's kind of.
Can you just send an invite to my email as well?
Oh, okay, hang on.
I'm gonna try screen.
The SBC, right?
Yeah. Yes.
Yeah. Let's see. No, not that.
Birthday.
It's PEDERSEN, right?
Yes.
Okay. There you go.
I told you
Is that
Grace would
good?
beat me. I told you Grace would beat me.
I don't know why that works.
It's okay.
Okay. Ooh.
I have the big screen now.
Oh, okay. All right, is that better? Are we good? You can hear us play? So did you hear what I was saying about the Wikipedia change and doing exhibitions in class on the 20th?
Yes.
Okay. All right. I think that was it in the way of announcements. Let's go ahead, unless there's anything else. I do want to draw, if you haven't already, make your appointment to meet with me to discuss your exhibition. Yeah? So I sent that out. I shared a Google. I guess I did it as an announcement. Did I do it as an announcement? I think did I send it out as an announcement, or I guess either way, I'm just going to write
Something that was
email.
a file on Google Drive that we could edit.
Oh, okay. So if you haven't already, just make sure that you, and if that time doesn't work for you, just email me and we'll work out another time, okay? But I wouldn't leave it too much later, yeah? Try to do it as soon as you can. I want to draw your attention to, because I said this at the beginning of the semester, but it has been a while. If you scroll down to the very bottom of our Google Classroom page,
I don't think I have deadlines on.
you'll see. Okay, you'll see right at the very bottom, it's the very first post. You'll have the exhibition project guidelines. Make sure you're looking at those, okay? Sometimes it's easy to think you have an idea of what to do, but make sure you're looking at those because I give you very clear questions to address in your introduction. So you're going to want to make sure, not only when you're writing it, but when you're coming up with the idea that you have those things in your mind. So read the guidelines carefully. Second, if you haven't already, make sure you're also looking at the PDF that I uploaded. It's writing an entry in the exhibition catalog. Okay, and that'll tell you how to do it. There's a certain way of doing it, and I'll be looking to see if you're doing it correctly. And then the DeMonte and Raven's Women of the World. That, as I said before, is an introduction to, basically the book itself is sort of a catalog. It was never an exhibition that took place, but it's sort of this catalog, I guess, of her ideal exhibition. So this is, in a way, she's doing exactly what you're doing. That's why I use this as a model. So for your catalog entries, you're going to want to read the Barnett example. And for the introduction, you're going to look at the DeMonte and Raven's introduction. Okay? So start there. If you haven't, because sometimes it's easy to take an idea and run with it, and you can be way down there. But if you haven't actually looked at what's required in the models that I'm asking you to look at, you may be off track. So just to pull you back a little bit, make sure you're looking at those documents. Okay.
Since it is such like a long scroll down and it takes so long, do you think you could like possibly just repost
Sure,
the
sure.
PDF?
I'll repost it. Yeah, that's a good idea.
Because it takes
Yeah.
a while.
Yeah, it does, doesn't it? It's a little fiddly. We were talking about this morning, I think, Carolyn and I were reading, something we're talking about. So we'll, I will repost that then. Okay, so if there are no questions about anything, we'll get on with the assignment or the readings. And I just wanted, rather than going back and forth with the screen share, because it kind of would cut out and do funky things sometimes, I've uploaded, Nicole and Lauren, the PowerPoint. It's the most recent post. So I'm going to go ahead and I guess, yeah, if you'll pull it up on, because you each have your laptops, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so if you'll open it up on your laptops and look at it, and then what I'll do is I'll just project it here for us. Is that okay?
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Rather than screen sharing?
Mhm.
So. Just open that up real quick. Oh, and I just wanted, also another quick announcement, I sent out the second participation grade. Okay, make sure, remember that you're supposed to be posting more than once on at least one of the threads.
Wow. I thought it was like twice on all of the threads.
That's what I thought it was
That's
too.
what I've been doing.
Well, twice on all the, okay, so twice
Wait, I
on all the
should've tried
threads.
Is that it?
I'll have to go back and look, but I thought that in particular, I wanted you to get really involved in at least one post, so you kind of check back. No? I guess I said two. Two?
It was like you said 2 per, but then it was like when we did the presentations on there, you had to comment on all of them once and then
Maybe
more
that's
than
where I'm
once
getting
on one and
confused.
getting in depth. But I
Okay,
could be wrong.
okay. All right, I take that back, so twice. So twice on each of them. So, and the idea is again that you're involved in a dialogue. It's not just like I've done my homework, tick it off my list, and I don't go back to it, right?
It's really hard to do it because everyone comments on Wednesdays.
Well, that's why I was giving the incentive to Mary's idea to do extra credit, and only a few of you are taking me up on that. And I think at this stage, some of you might want to, yeah, because that part of the grade is a little bit lower, and to get the extra credit will really help boost you.
Because
It's a
I
good
go and try
opportunity.
to comment, I feel like I can never get on Wednesdays because I'm in class all day.
Yeah.
And
that's
so it
my
looks like I never
issue.
comment because everyone comments on Wednesdays.
Oh, to make your second.
Yeah. To make the second comment.
Oh, I see. I see.
It's like Mary and I do it on like Saturday.
Yeah.
And then, because we want to get our homework done over the weekend, especially when we started this class, we were swimming, so we
Yeah.
couldn't do it during the week.
Yeah.
And then it's like I have to wait until like today before I can actually come in the second time because the conversation doesn't
Isn't
pick up.
there?
I mean, I could answer back Mary, but it would just be a great idea, Mary.
Well,
Alright.
Days that I can cut it.
I think it's a great idea.
As long as you post by the end of the weekend.
So, and a
Your
Sunday?
first, your first
Pristine idea.
yeah, by
Okay.
Sunday. Okay, so maybe that's the solution, is to try to really get your first post done by the weekend, and then that'll give us a little bit. I know what you mean, because sometimes, because I'll always look at it on like Sunday, Monday, and there won't really always be a lot to kind of respond to, so yeah, it is a problem. So can I challenge you to do that? I know it's hard because that means you're doing all the reading in advance, because you have to read before you comment, so I get that, but if you can, that will
And-
help.
You said that you sent participation feedback recently?
Yes.
Last night, maybe.
Well, most of them were the other day, and there were a few I didn't get to that I did last night. Yeah, so did everyone receive a
I
participation
don't
grade?
think I received mine, or it just got lost, but I don't think I received mine.
Oh, did you, I'll send it to you again.
Okay.
Lauren and Nicole, did you receive yours?
I did. I just wanted to add, for me, it's really hard to post before the weekends because I work a 40-hour work week at one job and a 20-hour work week at another job, and I have 22 credits here.
Right.
I can only post on Wednesdays and Thursdays. And
Oh,
the
good.
are up soon enough.
Huh?
That is impressive.
Well, you know what, if that's the case, there's some of you with your schedules, working other classes.
I just can't get posted before Wednesday.
Yeah, in that case, just do your best.
Okay.
So, like, Lauren, you're quite involved otherwise, so I'm not gonna really penalize you too much for that. If it's somebody who comes to class and doesn't say anything, and then, you know what I'm saying? So, as long as I know you're doing your best, if it's at all possible, do it. If not, I understand. Does this make
I'm like,
does that help?
yeah. I just wanted to make sure that was okay. 'Cause, like,
Yeah, and I'm glad you reminded me of that, because you had told me, but, I remembered, but I hadn't thought of it quite so much. But I don't think it affected your grade, I don't think.
no, I've been doing fine. I just
Yeah, okay.
feel bad I can never post before the weekend.
Right. Okay, so I think that was it in terms of announcements. Let's go ahead and talk about, if anybody wants to get into the science of this, I'm invited to go into the other room and have a conversation. No, I'm just kidding. But a lot of this is over my head.
I want to get into archaeology.
I would love your insights, but understand I'm not a science person. So, any thoughts about the science or the conclusions? Clearly, people have opinions about the conclusions. And let's not forget, does it matter? That's a question we want to address as well, and that was a question that was posted. So, any comments?
If you're like the way their data is and the data they got, like if I got that kind of data and Guy on, I would have to write that my results are inconclusive and you can't take anything of it. And you say further research would be to do X, Y, or Z so we can actually have an assumption or a theory. But they go on, they're like, yeah, probably it's this. And I'm like, but your data doesn't support it, it's inconclusive, so no.
Okay, so according to
Most experiments
That is
would
the
be
definition of archaeology.
most experiments would be repeated.
okay,
I had problems with like even some of the handprints that they showed the analysis of. Like it was clear that like there was a thumb and 4 fingers, and it was highlighting the first 3 fingers and the thumb as the 4 fingers instead. And like there was just obviously problems with how they were doing it to start with that needed more bugs worked out for me to really take much stock in it. And I think the images they chose to publish in their article about it, which just totally blew me over. It was like, really, you picked the one where it looks like it's wrong?
And I felt like even in like the rhetoric of the article, like the way that they were stating their argument was kind of like admitting euphemistically that they weren't 100% confident in their conclusion, but that like they still had this like sort of inkling of a thesis that they wanted to assert, but it was kind of like apologetic in a way. I don't know, or maybe that's the wrong word, but it wasn't confident.
Yeah, and you'd say in the sciences you would never approach it apologetically like that. You'd just say this is what it is, and needs to be retested. You wouldn't make any kind of.
Or really,
I know whenever I do anything in Guion, if something like that came up, I have to explain why I think it isn't right too, and then explain how I could prevent myself from doing
I
that.
forget how many science people I have in here. That's really cool.
See, I was trying to like remove myself from science. And look at it the artsy
No,
way.
don't do that. They're trying to do science on it, so take the science.
See, but I'm trying to like remove myself from science in this.
But they're doing a science. This is a scientific paper.
I was reading.
But it's a really poorly written science. That's why. Then that's why I was trying to take myself away because I'm reading it. I was like, this is really poorly written.
Okay.
And the other one I read the other day.
The theory is based on really cool because it's about these two fingers actually, and males who are produce more testosterone usually this finger is taller than your forefinger,
Oh,
and it's like a thing. So typically, and there's also like studies with like gay women and straight women and like how you're more likely to be gay. It's like a thing.
Is that
That's
for
this
real
finger.
or is that just like
Wait,
what?
this one's
Because
longer?
if one finger is longer than the other, it means you have more testosterone.
Yeah,
so they think
this
that you're
finger
more
here.
likely to be a lesbian.
Okay, so you're saying if this one is longer,
Yes.
It's these, yeah.
like a lot or just?
What is there about
this
I think like noticeably different.
Then
If you look at the study,
your
like
pointer
if they were
finger is
showing a
longer
picture,
than
males'
your-
fingers
These two
are
pointer
much
fingers
longer
are
than
the
pointer
ring
fingers.
What if they're the
I
same?
mean,
My hands.
But there's like much more studies on that.
Yeah.
That are pretty interesting and like
Wait,
more accurate, more feminine
One's
men,
longer,
less
one's
men, and
longer.
more masculine.
Right.
Close to each other in the genome or something.
Right, that's interesting.
Mhm.
So apparently we have a.
I don't know, the same size, but it's like a little.
I can't remember because it's been a while actually since I
read
read that article. But the one on the right, I think is the
That's such a
female, and
weird
on the left
way
is the
to
male.
tell. How is it conclusive?
I'm just trying to
Apparently do more
see if that, yeah, the fourth one is,
Well,
right?
and I think they highlighted that males' palms themselves were a lot bigger in the article, like relative to, and like women were like skinny. I don't know.
So you, were you convinced by?
I mean, I think they have found clear examples to prove one case from one handprint, but I don't think they had enough, like, they were like, in some caves, in like 2 countries, this could have been a thing, which felt not, I don't know, not significant enough.
I also feel like they haven't taken into account enough in their study itself the changes in human physiology over time and how they're using current hand samples to compare things this old that are prehistoric.
Right.
And that they're not considering all of the factors that may have changed since this was created.
That's a good point. And so one of the main people behind this study was an archaeologist. So it's your archaeology. What's your viewpoint? From one archaeologist to another, did he serve his discipline well here?
Well, to quote Dr. Chang, archaeology is a bunch of making things up. So yes, this is exactly what archaeology looks like in the field.
Okay.
We don't actually have anyone who can tell us, so we're kind of like, well, it looks like it might be this. That's what I'm gonna go with.
Archaeology is art history plus dirt.
Yes, exactly.
And to a certain extent, we do that when we're looking at, prehistoric art. There's something. Well, if you took my survey class, we did that little exercise. Do you remember with the little pieces and we get this little community and the whole idea being that we don't want to impose our cultural baggage on it. We have to always acknowledge that in the day we don't know, right? There are no facts. We can speculate based on evidence and we can come up with good theories, but ultimately we can't really prove all these things. So you're saying from an archaeological point of view, this is satisfactory scholarship.
Yeah.
Okay. But our science people are
he's putting forward a theory, not saying for
this is
sure.
a good point that it's a theory.
Then
Yeah.
why did he give a percentage at the beginning?
Right.
Well, that was a previous study, or a previous, like potential study or idea, I think. It wasn't his number, not introduction.
Honestly, anything presented by science, even if you have data to back it up, is still a theory. So
Right,
this
this is
guy
true.
has
This
a
is
theory,
true.
but nothing to back it up.
Well, he has a little to back it up. He has a little.
It's too inconclusive.
The scientific
It
point of view.
can, what you would do with that data is try to steer it towards a different kind of experiment. Like what you got in that, you're like, hey, this is the data that we can really get out of it, so how can we improve on that? And then you do another experiment.
Which probably is forthcoming, right? I mean, I think, clearly this isn't definitive. So, so what about this question, does it matter?
I think it does.
Say that again, Lauren?
I think it does matter. I think it changes how you in a canon of art history, because when these were discovered, they were sort of added at the beginning of the canon as like, this is a great example to like start off art history. And at that point in time when they were added in, art history was still a male-dominated field, and the people who discovered them assumed that they were made by men. And so it changes if the standard canon of art history starts with something created by women rather than something created by men. I think that really does change it.
It does, and in your art history, right? And definitely from an art historical point of view, that matters a whole hell of a lot, right? And for the very reasons that Lauren's saying here. Do you understand that? Do you think, I mean, even though a lot of you are kind of questioning the science here, many of you actually still felt that probably quite a few of them were by women. I mean, what did you base that on then, if you weren't really basing it on scientific evidence? I mean, again, we have suggestions, but not definitive. What makes you think that they were done by women? Any other evidence?
think
or
For me, I think it was because a lot of the readings in this class have kind of harped on some of the same ideas that women created the like arts and the ceramics and things and the tapestries all within like where they lived. So I feel like that wouldn't be like, this would just be their version of that.
Okay.
And it's in their dwelling, so it'd be like their area, you know?
Okay, so I mean, we have clearly created a link between gender and ceramics and gender and textiles. So you're kind of saying, why not gender and painting? If kind of arts are in the realm of women, this makes sense.
Right, and then like the other reading we were talking about on the message board, that had women doing that as well for like spiritual purposes. So this may have been like through spiritual purposes as well.
Okay.
So I don't feel like it's that far of a leap.
Yeah, let's talk about how these cave paintings, what are the theories? Do you remember anybody from their survey one courses if you took it? Or you would probably know from archaeology, but what are some of the theories about how these caves were used?
Like signature.
Okay, to a certain extent, yeah. The modernist in me likes to see it as this idea of the index, the proof of existence, right? A form of signature, but probably something more functional, right? What are some of those theories? Do we know? Come on, our history majors. We've got 3 in here, 1 minor. Actually, we have more than that. We have 5 in here, right? Nicole, you're also an art history major, right?
Yeah. Too. Yeah, I haven't taken that class since my freshman year, so it's kind of.
It was 11 years ago.
Okay, I'll
I
catch
just feel like
So,
a lot of it, if I remember right, had to do like with like spirituality, or like also like there are a lot of like hunting scenes, so like how-to guides and things, or like maybe like recording history being one of the themes. But I really forget.
yeah, no, you're quite right. You presented 2 of them there.
I think, well, I mean, this isn't the handprints, but like with the pictures of the bipes or like the animals and things, it was for good luck for hunting.
Well, that's one theory.
speculation.
It's called sympathetic magic, and it's the idea that if you draw it, it will happen. There's something about the act of creating that kind of creates this magic, wishful thinking kind of thing. There is another theory that Nicole alluded to, and that's that it's just sort of a record keeping, right? That it may not be that easy for us to understand, but it could record what kind of, because what do we have there? I mean, we do have primarily animals, right? And a wide variety of animals. And people. But the thinking is maybe it's some kind of like historical record, some way of kind of keeping track of what's where and so on. So it has more of a practical function. And then Nicole also alluded to another possibility, and this one has to do with more spiritual significance, that maybe they were created by shamans, and I could tend, well, okay, I won't say anything, but it has spiritual significance. So we don't know exactly what took place in these caves, although we have found instruments. So, is this kind of like a spiritual, like a sacred place where different rituals were carried out and the paintings had something to do with this? So those are the 3 kind of working theories that we have now. But based on that information, do you think that these were done by women? And again, we're speculating. I'm not coming to any conclusions. But speculation is okay.
Well, I think we talked about this in the thread, but like subject matter, like people, like men would be around animals or the things we'd see pictures of more potentially than women. And I think someone brought up that like home life could be too redundant and not interesting enough to put spiritual around or to have fears around the way that maybe big animals do. But yeah, the potential subject matter and like if you're around that, would you paint that? I don't know.
And the animals could always like represent individuals. I mean, that maybe that's a really giant leap, but like if the bison was like the father or the mother, and if you paint like a little mama animal and a baby animal, it's for fertility. Like it could always be representative of other things as well.
Well, the figures are more, the figures you can't identify. Well, there is one that has this obvious erection. So that's presumably male. But most of them you can't really tell. And they're not set up in that way, right? I mean, they're hard to read. Some of them are very clear, like they have sort of animals that they've been able to identify the exact kind of breed and everything. It's so detailed. And then other things are more abstract. But nothing is that clear, especially when it comes to the figures. So if we go with the hunting and the kind of practical aspect of this, we would tend to think that it's probably more male, right? Because I mean, and you know, if you think about it, yeah, Lauren?
I feel like if it's like the sympathetic magic theory where it's like good wishes for a good hunt, it would probably be the women doing it while the men were out hunting. But if it's like record keeping, then it's probably the men after they came home, like, oh man, look what we caught.
Yeah. No, that's a good point. I hadn't thought of it that way. I mean, and we can even tie it back into the reading on the traditional Indian painting done by women, right? In a way, they're the one, even though it's a male-dominated society, they are the ones with the power because they believe that through this act of painting, this sort of ritual of painting, they can make things happen. Remember, like that one guy getting his job, yeah? So, I mean, there is kind of an interesting comparison there. That's true. That's true. But I know, but my first thought was, I wonder if they ever got up close to these enough to be able to see them so detailed. Because like I said, some of these are quite detailed. But then again, if you're bringing them home, they're probably doing the processing of them, right? So they would know them very intimately.
I have a question. So is it like generally like believed / accepted that like these people actually like lived in the caves that they painted in? Or that, because I mean, I don't like necessarily, I mean, I don't know anything about like Neolithic / Paleolithic times, but I mean, it seems kind of strange to like live in a cave. Like you'd think there might be like another like source of like, I don't know, like home building or something, because caves aren't exactly comfortable. So like, I don't know, like, because I think that if like people went to caves specifically to paint, it would be a very different activity than like painting the walls of the cave that you like inhabited. I don't know if that's like.
This is a really good point. I'm not sure, but I think most people probably believe. Well, maybe I'm imposing my own belief on this. So I have to be careful. That they were probably not actually used as homes because, as you said, it's just not practical. Yeah. Very damp, very dark. Yeah. And that kind of supports the third theory, is that these were sacred spaces. And in many, yeah?
I've also heard the theory put forth that it was like a place to like winter. Like you would go to the caves in like the winter times when there would be harsher weather, when there would be snow and heavy rains, because it was easier to be protected there.
Yeah, well, that is the point. With bad weather, that would actually be an ideal place to live. The third theory makes more sense to me just because they're not that it can't be a little bit of each, right? It doesn't have to be one definitive explanation for the use of these caves. It could be many, but caves tend to be sacred spaces in more than one culture. Like mountains tend to be sacred spaces, caves, and it's sort of we see it quite often. And also the fact that it is separate from the everyday. Because if you think about sacred spaces, if you think about cathedrals or a stupa or a mosque or any kind of religious building, there's this idea of a threshold that you're crossing from a secular space into a sacred space. And then that is a special space, right? Only for special activities. And the cave just seems perfect to that for me. Also, if it was something where shamans would frequent, shamans have visions. Where better to have a vision than in a really dark cave, right? You imagine, and you might get glimpses of things. You can hear the water dripping if there are instruments playing. I mean, it could be a little trippy, so to speak. So it seems to me that that would be a perfect place to have visions. But if we do go with that theory, were the shamans women? And we don't know. Latin American countries, they were men for the most part. So, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they couldn't be women. We've certainly seen women taking on spiritual roles before. Any thoughts about that, the sacred space theory in particular?
I mean, I like that because that would seem to preserve paintings as opposed to them just repainting over with like another set of daily information or boring or. Because that would make me think that they would go over each other and necessarily wouldn't have held value to not touch the ones that other people had done. So that kind of makes sense.
Yeah, that's a good point.
If they had fire inside of it, it's not like the wind could blow it out or the weather, any type of weather. So.
Werner Herzog, he makes all these really amazing documentaries. I don't know if you've watched any. He did one on, I think it's Lascaux in particular. And he goes in, because you can't go into Lascaux, is one of the most well-known ones, it's in France. And you can't actually go in it now. They've recreated one because there was just too much damage. So they recreated it. But he got permission to actually film within the real cave. And it's sort of another world. I mean, it really is. If you watch it, you'll see what I'm talking about. So even if you do have light, it's just a little bit of light. And then when you look up and you like get the glimpse of like this bowl, you know what I mean? It's kind of trippy. It really is interesting. But anyway, any other thoughts about the cave or any of the theories? We think women, men. What are we kind of leaning towards?
Whoever's in the cave at that particular time.
That's a safe answer, Mary. So, but yeah.
I feel like it could have been some of both. Yeah, like it really could have been a mix of both women and both men. Like looking at the handprints and saying that the handprints belong to both a woman and a man, and that there is a mix of both of them in this study, that they are finding a mix of both of them, but that doesn't necessarily mean that the person who's putting the paint over isn't all the same gender. So it's still, I feel like it still could be a mix of both of them. It just depends on what it is that they're doing in the cave at the time. Especially if it is a sacred space, like it would change whether the women were conducting something or whether the guys were conducting a ceremony. Like they'd have different things that they did, and they may both be painting.
Right. That's a good point. Or as I said, they could be both. They could serve more than one purpose. It could be a combination, and in that sense, you could have two. You could have both genders working in there, according to whatever they're doing. So, but I think most of us are probably open to the idea that, right, this is enough proof that women did at least to some extent, right? May not have done all of them, but certainly it seems to overthrow this theory that it's essentially a male-dominated field.
You think maybe like paint would come from women because women had like dyes for fabrics, so they're potentially working with like colors and stuff.
Yeah. The process of this is kind of interesting. Do you know how they make these?
Oh, don't they like? Oh, hold on. This has been a long time. Don't they like put something in their mouth and blow it on their hand?
Yeah.
You get blood from your mouth.
Yeah. Just kind of. I mean, it doesn't really tell us whether men or women did it, but it's still kind of interesting. I mean, it's a little DNA. Okay. All right. So, shall we move on to the next reading? The book does not provide, well, the photocopies I had for you didn't provide any examples. So here are some examples of the painting that we're looking at or we're reading about in India. So all kinds of comments about the role. Most of you seem to agree that it held spiritual significance or holds spiritual significance for the makers, the creators, and those that they live with, right? And I think most of us saw this also as a means of personal expression, artistic expression, a way of conveying creativity. Did we agree with that? I think it was Laura, and you talked about this idea, sort of the spark of creativity.
Yeah.
Yeah. Do you see this as a creative act, or do you see this as just a ritual? I mean, if you think about it.
I think it's both.
Okay. Well, okay. Go ahead.
You have to do it ritualistically, as in every day. But why does that mean you can't be creative?
Okay.
If you're not creative, it's going to get real boring real fast.
Okay, that's a good point. I guess I just say that because we tend to kind of think of ritual as being automatic, right? We go through the motions, but you're right. It doesn't necessarily have to be one of those.
That's one of the reasons why I compared it to like the sand mandalas that the Tibetan monks make. It's because it's something beautiful and temporary, and it's a gift to something greater than you are. And you know that it's beautiful and temporary, but you're striving to like make something beautiful, even though you know it will disappear. As a gift to some greater spiritual entity.
Yes, yes. Did you watch because Lauren mentioned that, so you might not have seen it, but I posted a little kind of stop motion time lapse of a creation of one. They're made in Tibet. They're mandalas. Do you know what a mandala is? What is it?
Well, isn't it like a little design that's like, it's not a flower, but it kind of looks like it, and they use henna and put it on their skin for different traditional, like.
Well, yeah, different societies make different mandalas.
But the monk one is like a very flat surface, and then they have different colors, and they very slowly like scrape different like stones to make patterns, and they like layer it, and then once it's done, they have a ceremony, they just like wipe it away.
Yeah. So I mean, and this is important because this is idea of ephemeral art. So a mandala, by the way, is basically a definition. It's sort of a diagram of the cosmos. Yeah. So it's highly spiritual, highly important. And what Lauren was referring to, and Mackenzie was telling us about. They're beautiful. If you haven't seen it, you should go and watch it. It's like a minute and a half, and they're really
also
beautiful.
frequently used for anxiety, like helping people who have anxiety for therapy.
Don't a lot of them come from like dreams too, or something like that? I thought that was something.
Maybe the ones I'm familiar with, not necessarily, but that doesn't mean they don't. But in this case, they work and work and work. It takes them forever and through many, many people. It's a collaborative effort. And they're stunning. They're really beautiful, very colorful. And then they're gone, right? And I think they go and, I think in this case, if I remember correctly, they collect the sand and they can distribute it, and some of it like goes into the river. It's all spiritual. So again, it's for the gods, right? It's not about making permanent art. So what do you guys think about this idea of ephemeral art? And then we'll tie it back into gender. I mean, it is in many ways foreign to our Western way of thinking, right? We wouldn't just take the Mona Lisa and say, it's done its job, we're gonna burn it, right? And it shows our view of art is very different than the rest of the world, where they don't tend to kind of put this monetary value on it.
It is kind of therapeutic in a way.
Okay.
To just have it be there and then done.
Okay. Yeah. So this kind of therapeutic aspect of it.
Yeah, I think it's the act of letting go is I think a big thing that will teach you.
Okay.
There's more value in like present time, I think, like present event, like to that and that culture of like wanting to make something beautiful for right now and being in like the moment right now and enjoying what's happening and then being okay to move on from that. Which seems to be different from like we have like a hoarding culture sometimes. So
yeah, and then the cultures we revere, like the Greek and Romans. Look at the ruins that are still here. Look how long they've lasted. It's all about the ego. How long it lasts, and what are you going to leave behind when you die?
Right, this idea of
Permanence.
permanence. I just realized it's kind of dark in here, so if you're taking notes, I'm just gonna turn this up a touch so you can see a little bit.
Yeah, and it's really dark.
Oh,
There's people there.
Yeah.
I see, like face in the glow of laptops.
I know it's hard enough to stay awake in the evening class, so don't make it any harder. Yeah, and I think also, you know, we tend to tie it to its commercial value, right, rather than spiritual value. So for these society, you know, the Tibetans, or for, you know, these Indian women painters, it's more about the spiritual. Again, offering to the gods. We do have ephemeral art in Western tradition, but it's really not introduced till the 20th century. It's part of the kind of hippie mode, right? Let's go around and we're gonna get a car and we're gonna cover it with jam, we're gonna lick it. No, seriously, that was a happening. Performance art, the rise of performance art in the 50s, 60s, well, really 60s.
Street chalk art.
Yeah.
It was so cute. There was a guy in London with chalk, and it just said, "This is my Facebook," and he was just standing there in Trafalgar Square, just like writing Facebook posts like you would post on Facebook, but he was writing them with chalk on the sidewalk, and that was his performance art that he was doing that day.
Did you see that, or did you see it?
I was there, and it was just fantastic to watch him do that.
Yeah, and the fact that it's chalk is washed away, just like it doesn't matter. It's in the moment. So we do have ephemeral art, but it's a very recent idea, and it's tied with performance.
Well, it's like sandcastle building.
Yeah,
contests.
yeah.
I think also like what makes it cool to me is that it kind of like breaks down this like notion that art is like this like upper class or elite activity, because like Western art history has kind of like glorified the role of the artist as like being like this genius sort of activity, like the artist genius, and like breaking that down into something that is ephemeral kind of makes it accessible to anyone, because it's no longer a commodity. It's no longer about building up the name or the like trademark of like Jackson Pollock or whoever, you know, Andy Warhol. It's not about like building up that identity. It's about like actually taking part in this like creative expression that's so essential to humanity. So
A contemporary example of that is Andy Goldsworthy. Are you familiar with Andy Goldsworthy? So so a lot of earthworks tend to be like that. And the whole idea of earthworks is it's not in a museum. You can't dictate what I do, how I do it, and it doesn't have monetary value, like Nicole's saying. So we tend to see a lot of this ephemeral work done with nature, but Andy Goldsworthy will make things, he'll agonize, like for, you know, hours and hours will create like a lovely little something out of leaves or sticks or something. And it's really beautiful. I'm kind of making it sound not, I mean, it's amazing work. And then the wind will come and blow it. And it's like, oh well.
But
Move on.
no, he's not. He was like,
Well, I mean, still, it's not like, I give
well,
up.
now I
I'm not
have
gonna
to
be
start
able to
again.
anymore.
Yeah, he's not like,
Right. Well, like,
But-
what is the point? I'm going to go do something more permanent. He keeps at it, is what I mean.
Yes.
Right? Or he could choose another medium.
a medium.
What were you going to say?
Oh, well, okay, there was this Tumblr post that had different pieces of his, and we went over it in Landa's art as well. But like you were saying, he does rearrange leaves, but the way he does it, he can make it look like it tie-dyes out from like a tree or something.
Yeah,
It's
that's,
like yellow leaves, orange leaves, red leaves, and she has.
yeah, he has,
Yeah.
I just saw that. It's fairly new, isn't it? Isn't it? Because I just saw something about it like yesterday or today. Yes. It's just kind of cool.
So in the way that he like produces artwork, he takes photos of it and then like sells the photos, I think.
Yeah, he'll make
And then he
money
does
for the
like
photos.
rock sculptures, but without like mortar and stuff. He just goes and stacks rocks in such a way that it like makes this little egg thing.
Yeah.
There's this one video of him trying to make one of the eggs and then it falls down and then he gets all mad and upset. But
Here I make it. Well, okay, maybe he's not quite as I don't know, relaxed about
But
it.
he's
as I
still,
said,
like-
but still.
he does it every day. Like that's part of his morning routine. He does this routine and then he goes outside and then on intuition picks up whatever he's gonna do and then works on it all day. It's like that's it, and then photographs it and you're done. But then like he did one of those little egg things in a field. that a farmer owns that's like one of his best friends. So I mean, he does do work that like has a permanent audience.
Yeah, there's a piece up in the National Gallery East wing that
And
is
then
that the slate one as you come in the east building.
Yeah, and then
That's
he did this like wall thing. I forgot how long it stretched, but he
Yeah,
made it
so
wind
he-
through. Yeah, he made it wind through like
Yeah.
the forest.
Yeah, he
made
does
it
do stuff.
in and out of water, which it didn't really go into water. I think it just like faded out and made it look like it went into water
Yeah,
and came back out.
no, it's pretty amazing. So do you think this idea of making a femoir, is that a gender thing or no? I mean, we tend to associate it more
I
with,
think it's.
I know we're talking about Goldsworthy, but we can see it within a more spiritual context, right, as opposed to material value. Is that gender? No, yes, no?
I think high priests were typically like men, at least in Catholicism.
Yeah.
But that's a much more, I think, rigorous cult like other religion.
Well, again, you could argue, I mean, it is highly, there's this mysticism and so on, but it also values the material, right? I mean, it's the object is what.
But then there's like Calypso women in the Caribbean, and they're like spiritual and powerful.
I mean, it's hard to say. I mean, I'm not trying to say definitively, but I mean,
I think it's largely cultural. It has like gender elements, but I think it's mostly cultural. And what that culture values.
so let's talk about this more. So they do it where? Where do they create these?
What do you mean? They decorate the inside of their house, outside the house, on the ground, like anywhere.
So I'm gonna chalk ones on the ground or in front of the doorways.
Yes.
Yeah.
Which is interesting because it goes, and they even use in the reading that word threshold. And I know threshold doesn't necessarily imply sacred and secular, you know what I mean?
Yeah.
But it is this idea of crossing over one space to another, right? So I don't know if they actually come out and say this, but it's almost as if the home is a sacred space. Did you sense that? The fact that it is at the door, the idea of, the gods, goddesses sanctioning this space. Yeah.
Or like, yeah, if you're gonna cross this every time you walk across this like piece of art, it's it's like good like that's just like hopeful thinking or like good luck or even like whatever. But I think that means something.
Yeah. So it's interior, exterior, again, even on the floor. And here are some examples. It's mostly white, but they also do use red. I was trying to find some more examples online. There are very few examples. You ask them, as it says in the chapter, how long they've been doing this, and they just say forever, essentially. So we don't know when this started, but conceivably this is millennial tradition. Which is interesting, right? Because it shows that women, if that is the case, that women were painting early on. That there is a linkage between women and painting historically and not just in modern times. Okay, so let's see. I think it's also worth mentioning, as it says in here, that these women are for the most part illiterate. So this literally acts as a means of communication, a form of expression for these women that they otherwise wouldn't have, which I think is worth talking about.
Sounds like a bunch of other.
It also reminded me. It also reminded me of like the henna decorations that are done. The henna is body artwork, and that they all have like different forms of them have different meanings, different significances. Like the henna that a bride would get is very different than like the henna that you would get to like just wear every day or go out on a date or something, even in modern times. And at the same time, some of that significance is lost as it's been co-opted by other societies. So like the co-opting this is like a commercial venture. It's like it's slowly disintegrating while it still exists.
Right. No, that's a good point. And you kind of sense that this is maybe not, it's not necessarily being commodified, but you do sense this is a dying tradition from the way it's presented here, right? That it is something passed down from mothers to daughters, which we've seen before is a big theme. But like other places, there's also resistance. The younger generation doesn't seem quite as interested. The kebab pots, for instance, that was the same kind of issue, right? So as the world becomes increasingly global, a lot of these ancient arts are under threat. There was kind of an interesting quote in here that I thought was worth reading. kind of going back to this idea of this as a, as being a creative act. If you look on page 15, if you have it out, page 15. There's a quote on the left-hand column. They're asking a scholar. It's a scholar, Rakmuni. I don't know. I know very little about Indian culture, but I'm assuming that's a man. But I could be wrong. Be more interesting if this was from an artist's point of view, but nevertheless, can we read that in nature around us? And that this reflects that maybe it's not. Will somebody look up Rukmuni, whether that's a male or female Indian name?
What page was it on?
15. 15 of the original text. And why isn't it showing up? Yeah, 15 of the original text. That's the best way to do it.
So Rukmini is a principal wife and queen of a god, Krishna, and something else. She was kidnapped and eloped, but that's in Indian folklore.
So it can be
was a queen or a
okay. So it
goddess.
seems to be a female name.
Yeah.
Sandy, that's a classical dance teacher. In my experience, a lot of the classical dance in India is taught by women. So that's something that I studied when I was a dance major in a former life.
Oh, okay. Well, that's good to know. Okay.
Oh, and one of the article is a woman, Rukmini Devi.
Okay. Okay. Good. So we are looking at a female point of view, which I think is important. A dancer, as opposed to artist, but nevertheless, I think this is a fair reflection of the artist's view of making these paintings. So can somebody read that in nature around us? Do I volunteer?
I got it.
Thanks.
In nature around us, beauty is fleeting. It has no permanence. Droplets of morning dew on a leaf, the billowing shapes of clouds, the dancing movements of a bird, the soft eyes of a calf, the smile of a young child. These all change quickly. They are not frozen in time. Why should art be frozen? Be still. So much of our art here is made only for a moment. It is beautiful right now. The artist knows it, and the gods surely know it. The earth just for this moment is more beautiful because of it. What more is needed? It changes as we change, as the days change, until again we make something of beauty.
Okay. So that was a nice quote. And again, going back to this discussion of the ephemeral. And also, I think pointing out that this isn't just sort of something that they kind of go through the motions. So they do see this as expressions of beauty, right? They see these as expressions of beauty. Okay. All right. Any other comments from that one before we move on? One reason I wanted to throw this in is because, and the whole reason of having this global perspective, right, is to show that we may view certain art forms, painting in this case, in a certain way in the West, right? I can't think of a Western equivalent to this. I can't think of a woman artist who makes it for spiritual reasons alone, to piece, right? So it's important to understand that painting isn't just a Gentileschi kind of painting, right? That I want to make a name for myself. I want to be known. I want people to buy my works. That's kind of our Western notion of why people paint. This is a very different notion, right? It all goes back to personal expression, appeasing the gods, the spiritual aspect of it, which again, we don't really see in the West. So I thought it'd be kind of a nice comparison for you. Any other comments before we leave? I think it is worth noting really quickly, it says right at the beginning in the foreword, I don't know if you read the foreword, but that 1 in 6 women in the world are in India, live in India. So actually, we have a whole lot of women artists that we're not even talking about, right? And I'm not saying all women do this, but it seems to be somewhat widespread throughout India. And it's an art form that's completely neglected. I mean, from what I can tell, this is like the only thing written on it. When you go online, you can find very few images. It's not considered to be important. And do you think it's important? Think it's worth studying?
Yeah. They're doing it for aesthetic beauty and purpose, and It's like
Yeah.
specifically their domain, so I think it's important to talk about.
Yeah, I mean, it's art in every, this is something we talked about at the beginning of class. And I said from the very beginning, something we're gonna talk about. It is sort of satisfies our definition of art in every aspect of it, but yet it's completely neglected.
But also completely neglects like the art market, which I
Right.
feel like when we talk about art and anywhere else, we always bring up at some point the art market.
Right,
And
right.
this has no place and no sense of that.
Right. And which you think in a way, a lot of Western artists would be all over that because like Goldsworthy, like others, they want to kind of reach outside the market, although Goldsworthy, like I said, he makes photographs, he makes money. But yeah, I mean, you think that, you know, artists who are trying to kind of move away from the art market or make an anti-art market statement would be looking to these kind of cultures for inspiration, but they're not. I mean, we don't know about them. Okay, all right. Let's move to, let's talk about the two together, Yin and Gentileschi. I have here, so if you want to move to the next slide, this is the only image by Yin that is online. And this is actually, as you know from the reading, is one that we're not 100% sure is actually by her. But the best example, I think, is Misty something, it's not coming to my mind at the moment, which is on pages 114 and 115. Those are the original page numbers. And it's page 7 of the PDF. Misty Willows at the Moon Dyke from 1643. Okay, so let's just do kind of, before we get to our comparison, let's just do a little background on her. So Chinese, what else? I mean, we had a pretty good discussion starting there at least.
I felt like it was really confusing. Like I had to cross out any name that wasn't hers.
Yeah. Well, I'm sure part of it is because they're Chinese and we're not used to reading them. But part of it is because she used different names at different times, right? Which I think is important for a number of reasons. It talked about as she went from being a sort of courtesan to a concubine, moved up the ladder, that she would change her name, right? And it was sort of a mark of status to change her name. But this is one reason, well, not only, I guess the main reason we have attribution purposes of forgeries, that seems to be the main issue here. But anyway, yes, she changed her name. That makes it more complicated. What else do we know about her? We've already said she was a courtesan, a concubine, and a lover to a very well-known critic and poet.
I found it interesting that when she was trying to move up to being a concubine or like a second wife of somebody, that she approached different gentlemen herself and got shot down by at least one of them that the article discusses specifically, because she was like, these are the people that like could help me do what I want to do. Very ambitious.
Yes, this is a really good, she's playing this, she's working. It's a system that's stacked against her, right? But she's working it in as much as she can in her favor. And as you said, it shows the signs of ambition. You know, like Gentileschi, she wants to be seen as a successful artist. She wants to really move outside that remember talks about the kind of amateur realm, so drawing bamboo, orchids, things like that. So she could become really a landscape painter, which would be sort of the most prestigious form. So yes, she's calculating these relationships so that they benefit her. Good point. But I think it's also, you know, like this is a common theme when we talk about women artists in the West, that she was in many ways indebted to those men, right? So there's this theme that we see that women quite often cannot succeed on their own. It's only through their relationships with prominent men that they're able to succeed. True of Gentileschi in many ways, right? Okay, what else? Anything else about her?
And the article mentioned that, hold on, where's her name? Liu Yin could never achieve, well, she had trouble achieving like the artistic freedom that Artemisia could. Like Artemisia took these like fables, the Holofernes, and then chose how she wanted to do it. And I don't think that she could have like looked at it from a more feminist, like pro-woman attitude and still been accepted.
Right, and part of that could be gender, but part of that is the nature of Chinese painting. It's very heavy on tradition. But still, it does seem to leave some room there that she could, that in that society, I think it suggests that it was gender as well as tradition. Is that the impression you got from the reading?
I mean, it did say that like women do these subjects.
It's something that in studying Japanese art, because I'm taking a class on that right now, we're talking about Chinese art a little bit. That there is some innovation that happens, but it takes a very long time, and it's usually like one guy who happens to have like a very wealthy patron who's very, very high up in government standing. It's what it takes for like major changes in their art to happen.
Right.
So, like any woman was never going to be able to have that stature to make a change like that and be accepted.
Okay, so that seems to support, the bit of both, right? That it's very hard to innovate and I make it sound like Chinese art has not changed. It's probably the most dynamic, in terms of contemporary art, probably some of the most interesting art is being done in China now. And historically I don't want to give you the impression that it's just stuck in time. I mean, it's not, it's very dynamic art. But as you said, it happens slowly. You don't just break out all of a sudden. And it's within the realms of tradition that you move it. You don't just sort of step out, right? You kind of abide by tradition and move that way or move that way rather than, So yeah, you're right, that it would be hard for a woman to make those kind of minimal changes. So she is kind of disadvantages the nature of Chinese art and being a woman.
Or even if she did or she tried to, chances are that wouldn't have survived. Somebody would have gotten rid of it.
Right, that's a good point, because she didn't have anybody there to say, right, this is, to validate what she's doing, essentially, right? Okay. Somebody brought up on the discussion board this idea of beauty. Yeah? I don't think was it actually her that was included, or was it another artist that they discussed? But this idea of talking about her, do you remember this? Within, near the beginning. Somebody mentioned this. Does anybody remember who said that? If you look on page 2 of the PDF, or 105 of the original text.
The Cahill or the Artemisia?
The Cahill, the
Cahill.
yin, yeah. So, and it's talking about listing, again, I don't know if it was her or another artist, female artist, but under the section titled Famous Beauties, I remember they said that there would never have been a chapter Handsome Men. And just to point out, this is similar in the West as well. There's you have a beautiful artist and they tend to be talked more about their looks than anything else.
I mean, sorry, but especially with like the looks in women and in politics, Elizabeth Warren started smiling because people thought that she was like, they had called him a beast like it because she wasn't smiling. And that's because she's a woman. I mean, the male candidates don't always smile, but they never like judge them.
Are you saying, you're talking about
yeah,
the Republican one, not Elizabeth Warren. You're talking about I forgot her name. See how quickly
Oh,
you forget those people?
Fiorina,
Yeah.
the Italian pasta sandwich.
When we talk about the gaze, it's never about like at men, you know what I mean? It's always the gaze, the male gaze is always like directed at women. It's just the object objectification thing.
Right,
So,
right. We were just talking about that this morning, I think, a little bit, or this afternoon, well, I guess we we're talking about more than that, but the visuality, right? The men looking at women. You remember that?
Oh yeah.
But yeah, beauty seems to be something that is brought up, and I think, but most of us agree that it's not necessarily in their favor to bring up beauty.
Yeah, it kind of discredits them in
Yeah.
a way, because people tend to associate beautiful with ditzy, unaccomplished.
In our culture, their culture, I mean, I'm sure beauty's not.
It's usually
Equal
used
to-
to discredit women.
Well, it is. Yeah.
But it certainly can be, but it's definitely a distraction, right? If you're talking about someone's beauty, you're not talking about their skills.
Which is a way of discrediting them.
Exactly.
Yeah.
I
told my friend once, I was like, don't worry, you're pretty. And she flipped out. Like, I think she was just like having a bad day.
Are you talking about
me?
Caroline?
No.
She frequently does that. She's like, "You're beautiful." I'm like, "That's not gonna help me pass my test, Mary. Thanks."
No, like I mean, cussed me out. She was so angry.
Oh.
You know her. I'll tell you later. But
Okay.
but you were there in the room.
Was it in my room?
No, it was in the computer lab. But I didn't.
Was it for that
I don't
reason
know.
that she
Yes.
found it?
No, I think she was on edge because her brother had said something about along the same lines, but meant it differently. I tell my friends frequently all the time, like they feel like, oh my gosh, I feel terrible. I look so bad. I'm like, no, you're beautiful. Shut up.
Well, if they say I look bad and you respond that they're beautiful, that's slightly different than them saying I'm gonna fail my test. It's okay.
She does that. All
you're
I said, like, I'm like, shh, you're beautiful. Thank you, Mary.
Those are two different issues.
It's like I'm gonna pay the bills later.
So yeah.
I'm
This
different.
girl she was not happy, and I was like, "What did I do? I'm sorry. I didn't mean it that way." But yes, I think she felt like I was discrediting her and her work, and because she is smart and she works for everything she's got. So
Mm. Good for her. Good for her.
yeah.
Conversations with men. I don't think men say that to each other, do they? Like, don't worry, you're a good-looking guy.
Well, actually, in my frat boy, I'm studying frat boys for ethnography.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
Frat boys are very close.
Are you saying?
It's kind of homoerotic. It's a little erotic.
Okay.
I was talking to one of my friends the other day, and he's like, I think I've seen my brother's junk more than I've seen my own. And I'm just like, oh my God. And they were talking about their frat brothers, not like their brother.
Yeah, no, that sounds about right.
Huh. So do they talk about each other's appearances? I mean, is it something they discuss, or can men feel vulnerable and you know, I don't look
I'm sure men do feel
Yeah.
uncomfortable.
No,
They are like that.
of course, in terms of masculinity, that none of us
You're only allowed to say it about
it.
your-
Do they have
You're only allowed
like
to say it.
bad days, you know, like bad hair? You know,
You're only allowed to say it to your friends,
to
though.
say you're
You
okay.
can't- You can't be like if a girl asks you, do you think this man is attractive? You can't say yes. But if he's your bro, then you can be like, hell yeah, my bro is gorgeous, and that's okay. It's only okay if you know him.
Oh, okay. So where are you doing this at? It's just
So it's a little petri dish of information.
No, it's not. I just really think frat culture is hilarious and interesting.
No, it is, and I think it's a wonderful idea. Have you thought about UVA since it's so strong at UVA?
I have a little bit, but it's easier to get to.
Yeah,
Kansas.
Well, like Kansas City is pretty. How we have Pink Bubble, they have probably their own deal going
Oh,
on
they
there.
do.
And I think Preppy Frat Boy is different than like New
Oh.
Hampshire University Frat Boy, which is like very different.
Yeah, Hampton-Sydney preppy frat boy is a very different culture.
Yeah.
Yeah, so Hamden, Sydney, Nicole, and Lauren is an all-men's college that is, I don't know, what, 45 minutes away from here?
Yeah,
45-ish.
And
It feels
so,
like longer every time I do the drive.
yeah, it does. No,
It's
it's
an hour,
closer
hour
than I get in the
away.
car, I'm like, this is farther than I thought. And it is very, very preppy.
Yeah. You know, popped collars, boat shoes, pastels,
Bow ties.
bow ties. They all dress the same. It's terrifying. I walked into a party and there was just this sea of men dressed exactly the same. And it was the most horrifying thing I've ever seen.
But they do care very much about how they dress.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
And they're lips.
And they know how, yeah, and I feel like European outfit, they know, like they notice. It's like a, yeah.
I guess I just live in a house. I tell my son to shower and shave.
Yeah, see,
He looks in the mirror once a year.
again, it is very different between like
Okay.
a bunch of upper class preppy frat boys as compared to middle class non-frat boys.
Okay.
Yeah, because McDaniel is a pretty small school, but we have fraternities and sororities on campus, so it's pretty much like normal for us.
So you're familiar with that whole.
Definitely not like that. Like fraternity boys don't like walk around with their like boat shoes and pop collars, but no,
They do or they don't?
no, they don't.
But what is it? Oh my God, I know 4 people in it because they all have to buy the same suit.
Yes.
Oh, the exact same suit, and their tie, like it looks like stripes from a distance, but it's little tiny Greek letters for their fraternity, like making stripes on their tie. And it's like the most flippin' adorable thing I've ever seen. They show up to like the meetings for the fraternity that I'm in, which is a coeducational fraternity for the theater. And they like show up in their suits. They're coming from their other meeting. I'm like, oh, babies.
No, it was, they all have the exact same jacket. Like, it's not even that they're the same color. It is the exact same.
They order them from this, like, there's a company that makes them. Like, they buy the exact same coat.
There's a fraternity or like, I forget, it's like some sort of like male organization at like, I think it's Oxford that like David Cameron and like all of the like really high up like government officials in the UK were a part of, and part of it was that they all had to buy like the same, like I think it was like a velvet blazer that was like 10,000 pounds or something.
It's this school tie too, like the old English phrase that like old school ties can never be broken. Like it's not just like your friends in school, it's your physical like tie because you had one and they all matched.
Wow. Okay, I'm proven wrong then. So why is it we let them off the hook though? We don't talk about them. Well, I guess maybe we do. I don't know. That's a whole different.
But I think that it is important to note that it's a very different dynamic than like women talking about their appearances, because in like a fraternity context, it's all about like the power of being a member of that circle and a status thing rather than a genuine like insecurity, you know, or maybe if it is an insecurity, it's about like being a member of this group to counteract that rather than it being like oh, I feel bad about myself, like I'm gonna talk to my girlfriend about like
so much to the sense of community as much as vanity. Yeah, that's a good point.
I bet there's a difference in like average prep time for a party between a guy and a girl. And the girl takes like an hour and a half shower, you know what I mean, do her hair, everything, makeup, and the guy's like just make sure his bow tie looks nice.
You do that.
I actually haven't done that, but I might have to look into that and ask about how long
And
it usually
there
takes
are
them to get
like
ready.
Yeah.
there are Hampton guys that really don't fit that though. Like I've studied abroad with
Oh,
one
there
that was
are.
a flamboyantly gay, like super mega hipster. That was the complete opposite of anything you'd like. He's not preppy. I mean, he was a butthole, but he wasn't preppy. That's yes, look at you go. He holds his wine glass like that, and it makes
I
him
love
it.
Lucas. I love Lucas. He's hilarious.
So you guys know who she's talking about?
Mhm.
She said,
Wine glass, cigarette, fedora.
don't forget this is online.
Oh,
Not that he will ever look for this or
he
find it.
knows anything about it.
Okay, so let's do a little background on Jen Lesky and then we'll kind of get into the comparing and contrasting. So Jen Lesky, tell me a little bit about her.
She was the daughter of Orazio Gentileschi.
Daughter of, okay, so this is a significant theme, again, in the West, tends to be. Remember I said oftentimes women can only achieve greatness because of their relationship with men, and it's quite often fathers. Okay, so anything else?
I think it was the article was saying that Orazio really wanted to establish her artistic career really early. So sometimes the date of her really early works are like questionable because she would have been like 13 when this was painted, and it's really well done and really sophisticated. And could a 13-year-old have done that? And that's really questionable. So some of her earlier stuff's questionable. And then like the influence of her father on her work and stuff like that.
Okay. Good. Anything else?
It also talked about she was raped, correct? Or was that a theory?
No, she was raped.
Okay, for sure. And then with this Susanna,
And the elders. Oh, no.
yeah, Susanna and the elders. I was looking at that, I'm like, that's not right. That's
No,
Holofernes. That's Judas.
That's
That's the one. It's believed that maybe like the date was 1 year before the rape was supposedly happened. So they speculate that maybe this was painted after it happened, and her father just dated it the year before, so people wouldn't connect the painting with the incident because he didn't want her reputation damaged.
Yeah, and we'll come back to that because that is an interesting theory.
And in the reading, they were saying that she really wanted to establish like her career like young, But at the same time, like I was reading it and I was thinking to myself, there's so much skepticism that she may have had talent like that young, but if it was a male artist that they were looking at that had talent, that they would have just called him a genius and a protege, a prodigy, and all of these things, and they would have just like celebrated it rather than being quite as skeptical, I think, that it could have happened.
Well, and you know, she would technically be a Baroque artist, but there was during the Renaissance, which is obviously not long before Baroque art. There was this idea that if women artists, I think we talked about this, if you had a great women artist, it was miracolo, it was a miracle. So she was an exception. That's how they explained it. It wasn't that women could possibly be great artists. She was a god, it was a miracle, a one-off. It's a
fluke.
Yes, fluke. So,
Thank God that she can only learn watercolor just because she's a woman. You brought up one person in the earlier 20th century. She was a masterful watercolor person, and they attributed her talent and her skill to because she was a woman, because that was a womanly medium.
Oh, yes.
I'm not even sure who you were talking about.
Yeah, I'm not sure who you're talking about, but that is
You've given
common.
a vagina, you're giving watercolor abilities.
Well,
Done.
again, kind of gendering different types of media, right?
Had it been oil, they'd be like, oh, well, a man did that, even the way you did it.
Right, yeah. Good, Mary, good. So she was raped, and how did that go down after the fact? I mean, did she get justice?
Well, he got like a small slap on the wrist, and then she kind of got married off really quick.
Did she get married off, or was she not married? I was thinking she was married.
They
But
said
she-
that they
okay.
did some 13 or something.
Oh, okay.
To like make sure because they talked about the stigma with it, that even though, they ruled him guilty, it's still her fault.
Right. And she carries that with her the
Yeah.
rest of her life. Yeah. Okay, so let's do some comparisons then.
Well, with this one, the pose is mimicked from previous work, and the text talks about Adam's expulsion from the Garden of Eden, and I really like that she chose to take Adam's pose versus Eve's pose, and then I think it works really well here, and it was talking about how the body's not sexualized the way that it is in a lot of other depictions of this story by male artists. She's really, and plus the hands are up, and it's breaking the harmony of the triangle that's created by the two men.
Okay, yeah, very good.
And I think it calls more sympathy towards her versus just like focus on the guys.
Okay. Well, let's continue, and we'll talk about her painters and then her paintings, and then come back and kind of compare the two. You want to do it that way? So we'll keep you in the back of your mind. We're going to come back to her. Since we're talking about this, so this is Susanna and the Elders. As you said, it's easy. I mean, you talked about some ways that she approaches this subject differently than her male counterparts, and makes it a little bit more real that Susanna is actually a victim here. This is a piece. This is by Tintoretto. So oftentimes, this is compared to this in the reading. I'm trying to remember. I don't think it was. I think
I recognize it from previous classes.
Yeah. This is often a comparison made. So if you want to go, do you see where we're at, Lauren? It's the piece. It's the slide after Susanna and the Elders by Janilewski. It has Susanna and the Elders, and then another piece on the right. So if you want to go to that in your PowerPoint.
Okay.
Do you see it?
Yes.
Okay. So this is often these two pieces are often compared. Male painter on the right, obviously Janilewski female on the left. Same subject. So how do they treat the same subject?
The woman on the right seems really peaceful, and the light shines just on her, and she just it's all calm and peaceful, and she's just minding her own business, admiring herself in the mirror. So even she's paying attention to her own body.
Okay. So she's and this idea of vanity, right? So reinforcing the female notion of women being vain. And she's actually oblivious to what's going on because she's caught up in her own
And
vanity.
does the vessel that's like down by where I think her foot is, does that represent chastity?
Well, I mean, it could be. I don't know for sure, but it could. I mean, certainly bees have seen that before.
And okay, so is it like a symbol token of,
I
okay,
think it would be more if it was open,
okay.
but
Well, maybe the closed off is like restricting, like saying no, I don't know.
yeah, no, that's true. That's true. So I think you're right. She doesn't look particularly bothered by, she seems rather peaceful. She's
And
not-
very like hyper feminine, because I mean, you have like the luxurious like fabric on her, and then she has all the flowers around her. Because it happened in like a foresty garden-y thing, right? Near water when she's gonna take a bath.
Right.
Okay.
Yeah, so she's bathing, and that's why she's nude. But if you notice, I mean, we have the same thing over here. Not so much, but the gown, I mean, the towel, excuse me, isn't really covering anything up, right? Yeah, Lauren?
Like you can tell, but then also like hairpin and jewelry and all of these like discarded little fancies.
Right.
Whereas on the left, like she's completely unadorned.
Yes, that's a very, very good point. The jewelry and so on, the necklaces, the bracelets, earrings, and over here she's not. That's a good point. And she is in nature. I mean, I know that's part of the story, that she's bathing, but over here, she's not in nature.
Well, I think the piece is talking about how being in nature is more of like, it's adding further to like the sexualization of her.
Yes.
And then it has like the idea of a fertile garden kind of.
Yes, and this is highly problematic. I don't know if we've talked about this in here, but there has been a tendency in Western art, at least, and literature, to equate women with nature and men with civilization, essentially. So when you think of nature, you think it's irrational, right? Whereas civilization is all about reason, yeah? So it's not the most complementary kind of binary there. We're putting women definitely on the less flattering side. So it's interesting that she's not only not in nature, but she's within this wall that is carved. In a way, you could say represents civilization.
Didn't think about that.
Do you see what I'm saying? So do you think we can read rape into this?
Like really harassment.
Yeah.
No, I mean, I'm sorry, I shouldn't. Is this somewhat autobiographical? Can we read?
Yes, I definitely think so.
Her reaction is definitely less than the male interaction with her. So much that she doesn't want the male interaction with her.
Right, yeah. And that's a very strong stance, right? That's very clear that she is rejecting.
And he's just like awkwardly just like touching her hair with that one finger, and it's so creepy.
Yeah, I hadn't noticed that. Is it touching or is it just kind of pointing down?
It is awfully like right behind
It looks like he's about to touch it.
Yeah, even if it's not, it's still a
It looks
suggestion
like he's
of
kind of
touch.
pulling her
That's a
hair
really
back.
good observation.
like it's doing just like this to like pull her hair away and bring her neck. Like
Hello there.
Yeah.
It's like he's contemplating like, what should I do with her?
She could be in a bath.
Did you say something, Rachel?
No,
Oh.
that's why she was naked, and we said
Well,
because it's Baroque art.
Did you say, why is she naked?
Well, we started off with just them like kind of pushing back the hair, like hello, and then I'm like, okay, you don't go like, why is there a naked woman if you're just coming up to greet her?
Well, she's bathing.
Okay,
Okay, she is.
that explains it.
So I mean, we assume that her foot at the bottom would be like dipping into water.
Probably, yeah. So again, adds to her vulnerability, right? That she isn't just on display. This is a personal, private moment, and they're uninvited. You kind of sense in here that the way Tintoretto sets this up is that she's kind of inviting them to look. She's not looking, but you kind of sense she knows it.
Well, her legs
She
are
doesn't
like
mind the attention.
open.
She knows she's beautiful.
It was like her legs are like kind of open.
Yeah.
Like, she's just kind of like doing whatever.
This is another thing that's a
She's
completely
really
unnatural pose,
cozy.
right?
Mhm.
And that is a pose. Okay, I'm a feminist art historian, so I'm not going to deny. I'm not going to try to hide it, but I would say this is a pose together by a man
Oh, yeah.
intended for a male heterosexual viewer,
Oh,
right?
yeah.
I mean, that's not a natural, this is the way women naturally sit, right? And I'm not just talking about how this is kind of open, but, you know, the whole contorted, and we see this a lot, nude women often being put in these really weird contorted positions. In a way, it's a way of kind of,
I mean, it continues into modern stuff too. Like in comic art, there's a whole movement where people take poses that women are put in and they stick men in those poses instead. And suddenly,
fascinating.
specifically, they stick Hawkeye from the Avengers in these poses.
But they like move it so the boobs and butt are in silhouette.
Yeah, they do it so that you got the boobs and butt visible at the same time. Their backs are elongated and broken. Where are their organs? We just don't know.
Okay, interesting. Would you send me, one of you send
Yeah,
me a
I
link
can
to
send
that?
it to
I'd like to see that.
Oh my gosh, I want to see that.
I can post it to Classroom right now.
Yeah, she's gonna post it.
Another thing I mentioned was since a lot of the male artists, your models were also males, the females that they painted were male bodies with like slight modifications to be feminine. So I mean, if you look at like the way the body is shaped, Artemisia's looks way more like natural female body versus the like sort of muscular looking woman on the right. Woman can be muscular, but that not like
Well,
that
it's
type
kind of
of
a
muscle.
Rubenesque kind of thing, right? The rounded, you know, would have been the ideal at the time, right? But like you're right. This feels like a real body to me. I mean, I can identify with that. That's a
Yeah,
real body.
and the one on the
real
right
position.
looks like her head is too tiny for her big body.
Yeah.
It's really small.
Her arms really awkward.
She has a little like pinhead.
I didn't notice it at first, but in the one on the right, like if you look straight back in the dead center, like the guy standing behind the garden wall.
Oh yeah.
Oh,
So it's kind of from both sides. That's right.
creepy.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. So we've got one here. She's being looked
If she
at
wasn't
from
looking
all-
at herself, she would know.
I feel like that's how they're in the one on the right, I feel like that's how they're putting forth that like, oh, but she was asking for it kind of thing. Like she's so wrapped up in herself that like she doesn't even notice they're staring at her.
Right, exactly. Yeah, I'm gonna throw you off a little bit there, because this is a traditional feminist argument we make, and everyone just, yeah.
Ugh.
Bad men, right, but, you know, women think, yeah, so on and so on. But I actually was looking at some other depictions. These are both by male artists. So take a look at these. Do you think that argument is a sound looking at these? And I'm not saying you have to believe in one argument or subscribe to one argument
I think it's
than the other, but it could be a combination of the two. So don't get me wrong. But, you know, what do you say? Do you think it's more?
It's supported. Like the top one, she's contorted. It's not.
Okay, the same sense of the contorted body. Okay.
And the one on the bottom, she's not. She's just kind of like, oh.
it's kind of like she's inviting. Like
This
I
one,
think
Yeah.
it's kind of like you can see it both ways. Like oh hi, and then like go away.
I feel like it's almost like like don't touch my towel. Like you see like her hands holding the towel. I feel like she's like pulling it to cover herself.
But it doesn't look like it's a rushed, shocked, horrified thing. It's just like, oh, you're here. Let me try.
well, what about
Oh, look, you're stopping me. I can't.
What about this one up here, though?
I think it looks like she's very defensive because she's physically touching him.
Okay.
So,
Okay, that's a good point.
But she looks kind of like helpless to me. Like looks like she's about to fall in the water when that pillow slips. And then she's like, it just seems like she's about like, it doesn't seem like she's like empowered.
Both the guys look like they're like almost twice her size. Like she looks just completely crushed by like the like superiority of these two people climbing over this wall.
Yeah, and the fact that, like you said, that he is climbing over.
Yeah.
Yeah. So are we saying that we see the kind of same level of victimization here, or no?
I think that one does a little bit better as far as the men go, but I don't think it.
So the men are a lot more aggressive in that one. It feels like
Right,
They're,
so
they're not whispering over each other. They're like diving over that wall.
Which again, you could say actually.
Well, yeah, it was more towards I think the feminist view.
And as you say, yeah, arm is touching. It's physically pushing him away. Lauren or Nicole?
I feel like her face is where you can really see it. Like the face in Artemisia's is like you can see like physical anguish on her face. The other two just have very like classically, like beautifully painted.
Yeah, I agree with you. Definitely the face. But I think even the one in the upper right-hand corner, or do you think that's just kind of, or do we see it as being a little less genuine? It's a little bit more feigned, you know what I mean? It almost seems. Do you see what I'm saying? You could argue that both the one, we're looking at the one in the upper left-hand corner in particular, and the Gentileschi both have, both have the, the pained faces. But in a way, you could say hers almost looks a little bit more genuine. This one maybe looks a little bit more.
Artemisia's looks angry.
Yeah, these are more scared or just like confused. This one looks confused.
Like even her cheeks look redder in Artemisia's. Like
And you make a good point that we still have a contorted body here. The weird
Your
position.
arm doesn't go back like that. I'll just put that out. Like
If you were defending yourself, you're not gonna be like, "Wah." It's like-
Yeah, this is kind of painful.
yeah.
yeah, your arm doesn't bend like that.
What if
naturally.
someone's coming up behind you, like you're gonna like
See,
Do
I
whatever
whatever
you
but then
do.
you're not getting a lot of pressure in that
it
way.
look like that.
Yeah, that's a good
Way.
point.
Yeah, I would
Like,
turn
it's not
around.
Really a good.
But then your
But then
naked
you can't
body
see-
be on display.
Who cares
Turning
if you're
towards
fighting? Who cares?
Yeah.
Like it,
That's so uncomfortable. Like
My naked body would
trying to hold him off.
Yeah,
this way dance.
yeah.
Yeah.
Okay, so you're saying you think there is after, because I thought it would be helpful to look at some other examples, because you have to be careful. You can isolate things and make these arguments. But you're saying that even after looking at other depictions, you're fairly convinced that this is, in other words, Gentileschi is providing a very personal female point of view here.
Yeah,
to
this one's much more
Like angry in her. Where other ones are like, it's a
Yeah.
shame.
I feel like it's also it focuses so much on her than the two men. Like the men in all of the other ones are so much more active. Even the one where they're like almost completely hidden by the garden, but they're being sneaky. Like they're a more active part of the painting, and the two guys in hers are the least active part of the painting. Like it's about her.
Yeah, that's a good point. That's a really good point. The emphasis, I agree, does seem to be more on her. Shall we look at the Holofernes now? Yes. So we're gonna go back. So we'll look just at hers. This is Judith and Holofernes by Gentileschi. And then if you just would, I like to look at it alone first.
Oh,
It can be kind of influenced when you're doing the comparison, so just looking at it. So,
the lighting reminds me of Caravaggio.
yes, and she was a follower of Caravaggio. This is Caravaggio's, was this not in the reading?
I don't remember.
I'm trying to remember. Anyway, this is Caravaggio's depiction of the same scene. Okay, so again, can we look at this in terms of gender? Are they treating the same subject different according to their gender? This is the question. So, what do you think? So in the comparison and contrast picture, Lauren and Nicole, you see it?
Yeah.
I don't think the one on the right was.
Hmm?
I don't think the one on the right was in the reading.
Okay, okay. I couldn't remember if it was in it or not.
I think.
Okay, this one, okay, talk to me about what you see.
The woman wait, you said the one on the right's Caravaggio?
Uh-huh.
Okay. On the Caravaggio one, Judith seems like she's much younger and her arms are much like, I mean, they're still muscular, but they're still thinner. And she, I don't know, like maybe it's just her hair. She does seem like a person that normally would be a pretty like innocent person. She looks really confused and a little sad. While the one on the left, in Artemisia, she knows exactly what she's doing and she's angry about it.
Okay, okay. Would you agree, disagree?
I just don't see how the girl on the right's like actually chopping someone's
Yeah.
head
Like she
off.
doesn't
The way
seem like
she's
that.
She's like, I'm kind of here, while the other two are like, get down, like we're
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
The
this
one
she's
on the-
just
like, I'm
she's just
holding
cutting
the
through
sword.
butter.
Right, the one on the right could be like chopping
It's not as
onions
violent
and
either.
facing family problems.
Or she's
and have the same face.
reconfiguring.
Okay.
Well, you're halfway through it. It's too
Right, it's like you said, it's just, really, you would need to put some force into that. It's not that I've ever.
And it does not look like she's putting any force.
I can imagine, yeah. And it couldn't happen like this.
Right, you'd have to pull it, yeah.
Both of them, interestingly enough, it's a very similar
Composition.
stance, yeah, composition.
And then you got the burst of red on one being at the top in Caravaggio's, and then it being draped across Holofernes on the left. And then I think it's interesting to point out the age difference in the Caravaggio when you have the very, very old like maidservant person, and then Judith is very, very young.
Well, and the assistant here is ready, the cloth, they're gonna take the head, right? Whereas this, the second woman is actively involved in this.
So I'd imagine she had to
So
be.
that she can. The second woman's holding him down in that.
It looks like his arm
Right.
is even like fighting back.
Yes, yes, this is a
I
very
think someone's cutting
powerful.
his head off.
Yeah, I mean, who has the power here is very clear, right? Whereas here, it's almost kind of like, well, it's gotta be done, right? And I see her face as being, she's a little hesitant.
She is.
Yeah.
It's like second guessing, like, I'm not really sure about this.
Yeah.
They're determined.
And versus hers, yeah, determined. I'm
Yeah.
here to do a job and I'm gonna do it.
Mhm.
And again, those really strong arms. Strong arms here. And the
Diagonal
blood,
angles.
That
this
one's
is more
vicious.
realistic. And is this how blood?
No.
So, I don't know.
That looks like it's just like, oh, let's squirt some like ketchup.
Yeah, and here he doesn't seem to even be resisting, right?
No.
This really, as you said, Mackenzie, this just captures that feeling of resistance, which makes them more powerful.
I really like that one.
So again, do we see gender as being a factor here?
Yeah.
Do we need to read her background, her biography into this? And this is a big question because a lot of people say, she's getting back at men through her painting, right? When she couldn't in her own life.
I think she's expressing it
Yeah.
with expression.
So do you think, I think most of us agree there's a degree of truth there to that argument. Would we agree? But is it, should we be talking about it? Or again, is it kind of like the beauty thing, like it's a distraction?
I think, sorry.
Yeah, go ahead.
I feel like less like getting back at them and more so trying to offer like a more realistic depiction of how a woman actually feels.
Especially with the Suzanne and elders, right?
Yeah, it's just like the subject matter that she's choosing happens to be subject matter that also has that like anger behind it. But normally women haven't been portrayed with that like emotion. They're just there.
Right. Any other thoughts?
Well, I mean, like art is self-expression and like what she feels, and that's what she feels. She wants to paint about it, what motivates her, what makes her feel things, then like that's the experience that she can like put passion into or put something into
Okay.
her art that way.
Okay, good. Any other thoughts? You can do it. Stay awake.
There's two. I like this one.
Again, into how much we should read autobiography into this, or biography, not autobiography.
I mean, I don't think it's the only thing you should focus on, but when you know it, it does give it a new level. Like there's multiple layers to the painting.
Authenticity in somehow.
All right, so any other comments about her? She's pretty amazing. I went to, there's lots of documentaries and movies on her. There's one done not long ago, and a woman spoke at the Virginia Museum of Fine Arts in Richmond, and I went, and she was basically trying to kind of trace her life, especially after the rape, because it seems to have effect. I mean, that was the turning point in her life, right? Sort of before and after. That seems to be the way her biography is kind of written. Anyway, she was trying to track her down and try to find out about the real woman, right? And we do have transcripts from the court of the rape, the trial. So this isn't like we think it happened. I mean, it definitely happened, and we can even trace that back. But she was trying to find more about her as a woman. And really, I think in many ways, the question is, do as I'm kind of presenting here, this, do we allow her rape to define her, right? Or do we kind of just release her from that and just talk about her art? Do you see what I'm saying? Why this is kind of an important question?
I feel like art should be mentioned, but not like the number one thing. The art should be the most important thing. Yeah.
It's a tricky thing, and this is something a feminist art historians face, right? I mean, you want to talk about this being authentic, about this having a personal emotion, being something she could relate to. But then when you harp on that too much, it, as we were saying, takes away really from her ability, you could argue.
But I think
Amazing,
also,
right? Yeah.
I think also, like, on the other hand, like in my modern art history class that I took a couple of years ago, we read Linda Nocklin's, like, Why Are There No Women Artists? And a central part of her argument is that there were no education systems in place for women to have the same educational experience as men. And so while I think in, like, maybe a contemporary mindset, you can argue that, like, yeah, women artists should not be defined by their, like, experience as a woman, like that their art should not be seen or not be categorized as, like, just like uniquely feminine and nothing else. But I think that when you look at, like, the historical struggles that women went through to get the education to be on the same level as their male counterparts, it actually is really important to take into consideration, like, their identity as a woman and take that like as, like, the historical context for the meaning of their work.
Yeah, I think that's a good point. I'm glad you brought up her article because I was going to talk about that in a minute. The why are there no great women artists? Why are there no great women artists? But yeah, I mean, it makes a good point that if the danger of not talking about the rape is denying her.
Kind of like that girl that carried her mattress around.
Right, and treating her. I mean, and this is the big question: is how much should we be talking about gender when we're talking about art and artists? How much does it matter, right? And if you deny her womanhood, so to speak, right, you're denying part of who her identity is. And we wouldn't dare talk about, like, Jackson Pollock, who's this macho, like, Western kind of guy. We wouldn't dare talk about him, strip him of his masculinity, right? So it's a very fine line that scholars are trying to walk in terms of how much we focus on gender. And you make a good point, Nicole, too, in that if we take gender out of the equation, we ignore the obstacles. That's the biggest danger. Because, like, this is something that if you think of, like, with textbooks, like a survey text, we talked about this, Mary, and if any of you took my survey 2 course, we talked about this. But if you just sort of put, like, several years, 20, 30 years ago, there was an interview. Do you remember Jansen? The Jansen text? Remember that reading? It's okay, I'm putting you on the spot. So Jansen, when I was an undergraduate, was the textbook. And there were basically no women artists in it.
I remember you telling us. Yeah, and then it was, like, only Western art, like, or European. It was, like, anything outside of.
Right.
It was not art.
Yeah. But it was this idea of the canon, and is the canon traditionally in literature and art in the West has been male and white, right? And so Linda Nochlin, who wrote this article that Nicole referred to.
I just posted on the Classroom.
Say that again?
I just posted on the Classroom, so if you want to read it.
Oh, the article?
Yeah.
I'm so glad you did. I teach a regular seminar with an artist, and this is kind of approaching it from a different point of view. We start with that. And so it's worth reading, but I didn't want to make it our focal point because I feel like it's a narrow way of looking at women artists. But yeah, if you want to read it, we can, as a matter of fact, I'm going to add that on to next week. Thank you. I really can thank Lauren for that. Or Nicole. Was it Nicole or Lauren that posted that?
Lauren posted it, I just brought it up.
It is really important, but I think we need to look at it critically, right? And see, it was written in 1971. We've come a long way since then. So I'm actually going to take one of the readings out and I'll swap it with it. Yeah. And we can look at it critically because I think it is important and it does need to be discussed. I just didn't want it to kind of affect the way we see everything. But you're right. So Linda Nochlin, we'll come back to that article in a moment, but Linda Nochlin interviewed Jansen, this writer of this textbook, this author, and she said, why are there no women artists? He's like, because they're really, there's no one worth mentioning. There just weren't any good women artists. And so, part of the problem is now, okay, not the problem, but so feminist art historians, including Nochlin, okay, let's get to work. Let's start reviving these women who were very successful in their time. I mean, a lot of the women artists in the West were court painters. I mean, very, very successful artists.
In one of Artemisia's self-portraits, didn't she have, so once you were like a well-known artist that was respected, didn't they give you like some sort of necklace saying you were like a part of that society or group or something?
Not necessarily. I know what you're talking about. Hers is what is it? It represents some kind of a guild, I think.
Okay, well, it's basically like validation. Yes, you're an artist. You did well. Go you. But she has the like in her self-portrait, and in the portrait she also has, I think, like a paintbrush, and then you see the easel and stuff. So it's all about her as like a professional.
Yeah, I mean, let's
So she did get recognition in her day as well, which I thought was interesting.
Yeah, let's just, if you'll look this up on your computers, just do Jenna Lesky's self-portrait.
There you go.
This is what she's talking about. And this is actually a really, I just think this is a stunning portrait, self-portrait. Look at that sleeve. Do you see it, Nicole and Lauren?
I'm trying to find a good resolution version of it, but I can see it.
This is the necklace she's talking about. But what's interesting here is it's just, and compared to former self-portraits, self-portraits done by artists before her, is that she's actually an active painting. Self-portraits before would be sort of dainty, right? And they'd be sort of like this. Like, here's my portrait, and here. Like, caught up, her hair is pulled back, it's coming down, she's caught up in it. But I think what this is really all about is her showing her ability. I think it's all about that sleeve.
Well, isn't the title like the allegory of painting or
Yes.
something?
Yes.
Like, this is the artist.
Right. But yes, but I think what Nicole was getting at is that if we want to revive the work of these artists, but if we just incorporate them with male artists and overlook the obstacles, we're undermining their achievements. Do you see the difficulty there? But if you focus too much on it, then again you run the risk of kind of ignoring their work and just talking about their gender. This is the big debate for feminist art historians. But the essay she's talking about, why are there no great women artists? Basically, it sounds a little controversial, right? And what do you think about the title first of all?
Yeah, was saying something. Although, so over break, I went to the National Women's Art Museum in Washington D.C. and it was like right next to the White House, and there were only 2 open floors. So like I was really excited. I was like taking an women's art class, like gonna get all lamped up in women art. And there was like one like floor that they had of their own, and then one like exhibition floor. And then they were setting up for some event, and then there was a library. And I was like, oh, like there's not that as much here as I thought.
Yeah.
I don't know. It was just like it was interesting.
Yeah, you kind of want a whole like museum packed full of these things, and it does. Yeah, I can see how it would be a disappointment. I mean, trying to think when I was there. I mean, they actually had a pretty great exhibition, so I mean,
it was very good, but
yeah,
quantity-wise, it was
quantity-wise, you're absolutely right.
I had the weirdest experience when I went to the museum for women artists in DC because I showed up and they had like a Hiroshige woodblock exhibit going on, and that was like taking over half of the place. And I was just like, what is going on right now?
It's a Japanese woodblock artist, male.
Yeah.
That's what she's saying.
I was completely thrown off. I'm like, what is going on in this museum right now?
Yeah. That's interesting. I can't even think of why they
From an arts
possibly do
management
that.
perspective, that's a bad choice. That doesn't fit your mission. Don't do that.
Yeah.
Like, I had no idea what was good. My friend and I were walking through, like, this is what we came here to see. It's cool, but like, what?
So what do you think then about even having museums dedicated to women? Is this a step forward, or women's art, or is it again a step backwards and it's continuing to divide us?
I also think it depends on why you chose that artist. Why are you picking her just because she's a woman?
And this is part of the thing, right? We don't want it to be tokenism, right?
It's celebrating of a culture. There is a woman culture.
That's the thing, though.
That
That's
there
the
is,
other
like,
side of the argument.
like,
You can't ignore that.
characteristics that are distinct to only women. You know what I mean?
I thought that should be a topic.
Sorry.
No, I think it's very, there's a lot to that.
Yeah, I mean, you know, and this kind of touches on this other issue of, you know, do women make art differently than men? Do women, you know, I think Gabby's actually gonna deal with this in her exhibition, and it's, you know, do women paint flowers? Do women paint, do they use more pinks? Do they apply it more delicately? You know, and these are questions that kind of seem a little inappropriate in our day and age, but there's still things that we need to ask. Is there a gendered way of creating art? Is there a gendered way of seeing the world? And if you take that out altogether, you're denying them of their womanhood, their identity, right? So but again, you can see how if you focus too much on that, pretty flowers, ladies, art, it's a tricky thing. Mackenzie, you gonna say something?
I was thinking about like men paint, like sculptors who are sculpting men, like chiseling themselves out of rock. You know, there's definitely like I think like a mentality of you know of projecting oneself into things like graffiti. There's like graffiti artists and whole clans that only do it, but it's not so much because they like it, but it's like the point that we're here too. So I think it's like partially like showing that they're like there is a representation of women, and not so much like I'm obsessed with flowers, but I'm obsessed with flowers because there aren't any flowers.
Okay.
You know?
Okay.
Yeah.
Any other thoughts about the museum thing?
I think it could work. It's just as long as you don't turn it into enforcing the stereotypes. Like if the curator only accepted women who fit this particular group, then it'd be just terrible. As long as you show like the women who are doing work that seems very like it's all different types, you know, and mediums and motivations and messages.
But what even about having a museum dedicated to women's art? Again, is that step forward, step backwards?
Right now, I think it's a step forwards because you're acknowledging what they went through.
Okay.
In the future, it's going to be further dividing us. I think it depends on where we are as a society. I mean, we have women's rights and things still being threatened today, and people still have that we're just now getting out of the gender binary and things. Like I think it's going to be a while before we get into it, but we're on our way there. We're just going really slow.
Okay. What do you think, Caroline? Because you said I think you said that you thought it was
Divides us.
I don't like putting anything like that's based on your like merit and your talent, like based on your gender, like assigning like putting male and female, and you're attributing what you're doing to something that you don't control necessarily. It's you know, it's not based on how hard I worked on it or the ideas in my head. It's based on that, and I think.
I mean, I think it's
I don't know. It kind of like you either have to have places that you don't assign a sex or gender to it, or you have to have places where every sex and gender is represented. So if we're gonna open a women artist museum, you need to have a male artist museum. Because it just feels like you're bringing up women, you're like women, 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 and then I think it's gonna reach a point where you've now shifted the balance the other way.
That's going to take hundreds of years before.
I know, but I just
years.
don't like the idea of treating any one group differently than the other. I think the only way to do that is to just not.
But if we don't give women the boost right now, they're never going to be equal and they're never going to be treated the same.
My issue is what Mary's saying is, are we just picking this because they are women artists? We're trying to bring them out of obscurity, but in doing that, are we actually acknowledging that they are good at what they're doing, or are we just acknowledging that they're female?
Yeah, and I actually probably on this issue, I kind of agree. I definitely agree more with you, Rachel, but I think you make a really good point that is part of the danger. You don't want to just pluck her out of history and say she's a woman and therefore I'm going to study her. Because I've been tempted to do that. Oh, this is an unrecognized woman artist. I'm gonna be the Linda Nochlin. I'm gonna pull her out of obscurity. And then you have to really look at it and you have to think, is she worthy of it, right? I mean, who do we look at, who do we not look at, and why? Right?
Recognized because she's a woman, or is she unrecognized because she's
Yeah, but that doesn't mean that you can't look, I think we needed to get rid of that whole plucking them out and, drawing attention to the mentality and really looking at the systems that repress them. And so like there's a group of artists I'm working on now, the French artists, and I'm looking at the critical response. There's a feminist, in France, there was a feminist newspaper called Le Front, which was published it was on and off towards the end, but in the total, probably like 7 years. And it was a woman editor, women started it, women writers. It was all run by women. It was completely unprecedented. And so I'm looking at the critics to say, are they championing women artists? Are they looking at women artists? Are they helping their cause? And ironically, I'm finding, no, not really. They're making fun of them for painting flowers and for using a lot of pinks and a lot of things like that. So to me, it needs to be looked at, but in terms of this sort of system, right? As opposed to just saying, like, this was a great artist and I'm gonna draw her to your attention, draw her, you understand? Think about that. So do you think that continues to reinforce, or, is that a move forward, step back?
Well, with the women museum thing, this kind of reminds me about when people were talking about are women's colleges still relevant, because you're still plucking people out of what would have been co-ed, bringing them into a separate thing, saying something is different about a women's college versus a co-ed college, and that educated differently, or it has a different experience and improves you or something in a different way. So I mean, it kind of reminds me of that.
Yeah, no, that's a good point. That's a good point.
I think also in response to the idea that we might be championing women artists solely on the fact that they're women, I think it's important to recognize that a major repeating thing that we've had to deal with in this class even is that our whole aesthetic criteria is formed by the Western male perspective. And so even our method of critically analyzing work presented by women or female artists, especially of different cultures, is just new ground, and is kind of an area that needs to be investigated and needs its own entity to designate the responsibility of maybe redefining the aesthetic framework, because obviously the ideas that art history was founded on in Western society aren't enough.
Yeah. Yeah, that's a good point. Any comments? No?
I don't think it's just necessarily the male view, because we have black art museums and that kind of thing, and I think it's important to highlight those as well. But we don't necessarily have white museums. I don't know.
I mean, the establishment prefers white artists.
Well, or is it just white artists had more access classically to be trained, so traditionally it was easier, so there's just more prevalence.
Yeah, and this is kind of the basis of the article you read. Men have more opportunities. It's that simple.
Yeah.
They don't need to be.
But by that standard, with the women artists thing, in the beginning we were talking about how more women are going to university and getting fine arts degrees and things, but still most exhibitions and art and museums that are being acquired are still men.
Mm-hmm.
So I mean, it needs to match if you're going to go with the skill level, because now that they're getting education, they're still not achieving that recognition in the establishment industry, so to speak.
Or how many are becoming art teachers? Because I bet a lot of women getting arts degrees are going to teach art in schools.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And there's studies about women being in more nurturing kinds of positions.
Oh, pink collar.
As opposed to
That's what they're called.
not specifically art, but logic jobs, or you know what I mean,
Mm-hmm.
not specifically related to art.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, they're nurses, they're teachers, they're really gentle things.
Mm-hmm.
All right. So, any other thoughts on that? So we're, as you know, hiring a lot of people right now. Mm-hmm. And I'm on one of the search committees. And I won't say who, I won't say what, but one of the members, who's male, of the committee, said he didn't want to hire one woman because she was too maternal. This doesn't really have anything to do with what we're talking about. It just
So
makes
what
somebody-
happens if a male is too paternal? That makes sense.
Like what qualifies as like crossing the line of like acceptable maternal in the workplace to like
What?
Why
Like
is
as long as
maternal
she's
bad?
not like licking her finger and getting a smudge off my face, I think it's
like
okay.
breastfeeding in class. Like, other than that,
I mean, I know this is kind of a different subject, but somebody said something that just triggered that thought, and I just thought it was so interesting that maternal
How
is
is
negative
maternal
in
a
this
negative
context.
thing for a professor, though?
How is it for negative? Are you saying it is, or is
No,
it?
how is it?
I don't know, women's college.
Yeah, that's what I'm thinking.
professor-
We're at an all women's college. How is that a bad
A
thing?
professor is an authority figure. Your mother is an authority figure. How is comparing these two things bad?
What was this person's like justifications? Like what made them say this?
She was older.
That's it?
That's it.
He didn't say it about the younger candidate.
So anyone that's older,
So he saw her as
Everything
like,
inside me just cringed.
so he saw like her as like matronly kind of?
Mhm.
I can see if like when a professor's interviewing and they're talking and it just seems like they're going to coddle or baby their students too much or give them too many opportunities to like get away with things rather than actually need help and get the help. Like I could see it in that context, but it doesn't seem like he gave any reason other
Well, interestingly enough.
Okay.
Oh, I hope nobody figure out who I'm talking about, because I really respect him as a professor. So I don't want you to think I'm bad mouthing anybody. Okay, so don't go and try to figure out who I'm talking about, okay? But he
And it's
also.
recorded.
Okay, I'll delete it really
Turn off
quickly.
the mic.
no longer live.
You can probably edit the video of some sort somehow.
Well,
Just mute it real fast.
for real?
Well, he's not gonna go through
He's
our
not-
class
he's not
and
gonna
watch
go through.
3 hours of video.
But don't. I would hate for you to view this person any differently. But it was interesting because then he was talking about a younger woman and an older male candidate, and saying he didn't like them because they were too, what did he say? Warm and cuddly. They're too softy, they're
Was the
too.
male candidate?
Yeah, the male candidate too. So I thought it was interesting that he didn't apply it to the woman because she's younger.
Yeah.
Didn't apply it to the man because he's a man, even though he's older, like the older candidate he's saying that about. Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
They were too warm. You know what I'm talking about? I
So
can't
if
remember how he phrased
you're
it,
a
but
mom and you're older, then you're associated to, or you're and like like nice and like comforting, seeming. You're maternal.
You have brother's original in your pocket.
I mean, for both of them, he saw it, for all three of them, it was a negative quality. But it was just interesting that one that he differentiated as maternal. Even though he's saying the same quality about all three of them. Is kind of like what Lauren was saying, is that maybe be too pally, not too pally, because we're like that here, but I don't know, maybe not analytical enough, not logical, I don't know. There was something about.
I have one professor that I feel like the best way, like it sort of describes that, and they will let you resubmit any assignment an infinite number of times until you get the grade you want. And there is actually no deadline. The day that it is due, you can turn all of your assignments in the last day of term. And then you can turn them in again after term is already over and your grade will change. Like something like that is way too coddling.
Is that male or female?
He's a male professor.
Okay, that makes sense. Okay. Yeah, I'm not really sure what he meant by any of those labels, but I just thought it was really quite telling that he used it to apply, well, obviously the woman, but the older woman, and used it as a negative thing, especially when we're in a college, as you said, where we tend to like that, right? Well, anyway, it was a complete aside, but she didn't get invited to campus. I liked her too. But anyway.
I still picture like all like old professors. That's like all like old woman professors as like mean.
Mean?
Yeah, because of Matilda. That's all I picture.
Well, I think like when we're hiring new professors, I think we're on like the younger ones, but like maybe like in the middle, like 30s and 40s, people who like have had some sort of experience outside of stuff, but someone who can also like be here for a long time and be invested into the school and help with the programming and stuff and be here for a long time, I guess.
Yeah, you have to factor that in, but I mean, legally, you can't.
That's true.
Legally, you cannot.
You can't
Discriminate on age.
Can't,
Or anything, it's like.
age,
The list is really
gender,
long.
anything.
This I mean, again, this is kind of an aside, and I know it's getting late, but it's kind of interesting because you can think it, and you can even say it, although I felt very uncomfortable when he said that. I mean, because I knew it was not something legally we're supposed to be talking about, let alone the whole gender, derogatory nature of what he was saying. But technically, it's just if you write it down.
Technically also, as long as they can't prove that's what you meant.
Which is why the writing down is important, because if we were sued, then they would ask to see all of our documentation, because we're asked to keep notes and everything. We're supposed to keep it for a period of time. And then they look at that and they, if we have, maternal written on it, then they have a case and we can be sued. So it's really right down.
Coddling written on it. They have no case.
Yeah. Anyway, that was just a aside. But just to kind of finish off then, so, if we're going to kind of compare again, and Artemisia, two different women working around the same time period, two different parts of the world, similarities and differences.
Similarity-wise, they both needed like men, right? to
Okay,
help them.
so they were reliant upon the relationships with men in order to be successful. True. Anything else?
For men, they use the systems that were in place. So like instead of just like, bye dad, I'm gonna do it by myself. That's exactly what you said, sort of. But just on a
But we
wider
do
scale.
understand they could not do that. Like that was impossible. And nowadays it's sort of like, okay, I'm gonna go out on my own, right? But you didn't. Do you understand that? So for both of them, there was no way but to go through this system.
Right.
You don't step outside of it at that point in time.
It's sort of a parallel in a different way, but I found that there was a parallel on how people perceived their skill and their talent. And that's something we keep coming back to, but it was definitely something that I saw in both articles, that they were both viewed with like a super extra critical lens by their peers.
Right. That is a very good point.
But they both still overcame that.
Yeah. Women do tend to come under greater scrutiny than male artists. They have to be 100 times better to be as good. Do you see what I'm saying?
Mhm.
In the minds of people.
Twice as good, did half as
Right.
much.
Right. It's good point. Anything else? What about the whole kind of, sex aspect of this? Well, I mean,
Collaborate.
well, the fact that one was a courtesan and the other one was raped. I mean, I know they're two very different
Is
things,
that like a
but
story people fixated on, or was that?
which the courtesan or the
Well, I mean, like we're like telling the stories of these girls, or like historically, like researching them. Was that like the sex aspects of their life, what people fixated and cared to take note of more than?
not so much.
Okay.
Not so much. I mean, a man doesn't have to sleep his way to the top, right? A man isn't subject to
Nobody, because at the top, he
women
can be a stud.
violating them. Do you know what I'm saying?
Yeah, no, I know what you're saying.
It's a big, interesting parallel there. What'd you say, Mary?
If he's at the top, he can be a stud.
Okay. Well, yeah. I mean, he's the man in the position of authorities. The women have to work within this, and both senses, in both cases, a lot of it came down to sex. Okay. Any other comments? We're ready to get out of here.
I've slept like 5 hours since Friday.
Friday.
I have insomnia and it's flaring up right now,
Don't
so
you
I'm
go
just
tucking
not
in bed.
sleeping.
I'm being maternal. I'm being
sleep.
maternal.
I'm trying to sleep, but it won't work.
Yes, well, go get some sleep. I will post the readings next week. So, bye, Lauren. Bye, Nicole. Have a good week.
Yeah.
See? Oh, okay.
So I have the option of doing extra
I get it before summer break.
Yeah.
You're meeting back like